Welcome to episode 174 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Laws Guy. It's April 23rd, 2002. We're in Calama, in Chile. Cobreloa is hosting Olimpia of Asunción in Copa Libertadores. We're in the knockout phase, round of 16, first leg, and by halftime, the match is over. Not because of a red card, not because of a pitch invasion, not because the football has collapsed, but because a coin thrown from the stands hits the referee, Ángel Sánchez, as he walks off the field. A match that began as another tense Libertadores knockout tie ends as an abandonment, a disciplinary case, a cautionary tale about crowd violence, and a strange prelude to one of the World Cup's ugliest refereeing incidents just weeks later. And to understand how we got here, we have to begin with Libertadores itself. 4 days ago on the pod, we were back at its first match in 1960 when Peñarol beat Jorge Wilstermann 7-1 and South America's club championship began with a bang. By 2002, that same competition was in its 43rd edition. It had become one of world football's great tournaments, technically brilliant, institutionally huge, emotionally intense, and often combustible. The football was magnificent. The darker side was never far away. The 2002 tournament had 32 teams in 8 groups. Cobreloa came through Group 1, where they finished second behind São Caetano on goal difference, both clubs ending on 12 points, ahead of Cerro Porteño and Alianza Lima. Olimpia came through Group 8, topping it ahead of Universidad Católica, Once Caldas, and Flamengo. That is how the bracket paired them in the round of 16. There's one lovely twist in the larger tournament arc. São Caetano, the club who had finished just above Cobreloa in the group, would later reach the final that Olimpia eventually won. The two clubs also carried very different football biographies into the tie. Cobreloa was still, in 2002, one of the strongest modern clubs Chile had produced outside Santiago. Founded only in 1977, already 5-time Chilean champions by then, and twice runners-up in the Copa Libertadores in 81 and 82. They were a desert club from Calama, built fast, hard, and ambitiously, and by the early 2000s, they had already had a serious continental resume. Olimpia was something older and heavier. Paraguay's grand old club, founded in 1902, already winners of the Libertadores in 79 and 90, and one of the most prestigious names in South American club football. In 2002, they were chasing the centenary year third crown. And then there was the referee. Ángel Sánchez was no provincial novice. He was an Argentine FIFA referee, already on the list for the 2002 World Cup, announced months before the tournament began. By then he had already handled the 1999 FIFA World Youth Championship final and had worked at Copa America 2001. He was experienced, high-ranking, and close to the biggest stage a referee can get. So Calama was supposed to be one more step on that road. And in football terms, the first half was not chaos. Cobreloa scored first through Mauricio Dinamarca in the 10th minute. Olimpia replied almost immediately, Nelson Celaya equalizing in the 12th. There were bookings, yes, but nothing resembling a breakdown. Sanchez himself later said it had been a clean, entertaining match with no controversial incidents and no dismissals. By halftime, it was 1-1, exactly the kind of tight first-leg scoreline Libertadores often produces. And then came the coin. As Sanchez walked toward the dressing rooms, an object thrown from the stands struck him in the head. Sanchez later said nobody had expected aggression, that the stadium had been in a festive mood, and that the object had been fired with a slingshot. He was knocked senseless for about 5 minutes, taken to the Hospital de Cobre in Calama, and doctors later determined that the wound was superficial. But superficial is not the same thing as trivial. A referee had been hit hard enough in the head by a projectile from the crowd that the match couldn't continue. So the match was abandoned at halftime. And then came the disciplinary response. CONMEBOL awarded Olimpia a 2-0 victory, turning a 1-1 halftime score into a formal away win, and closed Cobreloa Stadium for international matches for the rest of 2002. Not Chilean domestic football in general, continental football. That distinction matters. It tells you where the punishment was aimed, at the club's responsibility in South America's premier international competition. The second leg in Asunción removed any doubt. Olimpia won again, 2-1, through goals from Miguel Ángel Benítez and Ricard Baez, with Cobreloa replying through Osvaldo Canopio. Aggregate score 4-1. From there, Olimpia beat defending champions Boca Juniors in the quarterfinals, edged Gremio on penalties in the semis, and then defeated Sao Caetano on penalties in the final to win their third Copa Libertadores. What had looked, in Calama, like a chaotic and ugly interruption became part of the pathway to the title. So what then did this incident mean? It mattered because of the injury itself. Photographs from the aftermath make the blow look ugly, and even if the medical verdict was that the wound was superficial, Sanchez had still been knocked out and hospitalized. That is not gamesmanship, that is assault. And it is why the abandonment was immediate and unavoidable. In Libertadores history, there have been many ugly incidents, but not all of them land literally on the referee's skull. This one did. It also matters because Sanchez recovered quickly enough to make the World Cup, but the World Cup gave him no peace. He refereed South Africa against Slovenia on June 8, then Portugal against South Korea on June 14. That second match became one of the most contentious of the tournament. Sanchez sent off João Pinto, and FIFA later suspended Pinto for striking him in the stomach. Sanchez himself said it was the first time a player had attacked him. So within less than 2 months, he was first hit from the stands in Chile, then attacked by a player at the World Cup. It is a remarkable and rather grim sequence. Finally, Calama sits inside a broader story of football hardening its safety logic. Law 5 explicitly says the referee may stop, suspend, or abandon a match if an object thrown by a spectator hits a match official, player, or team official, depending on the severity. FIFA's stadium safety and security regulations likewise require the protection of players and officials against spectator intrusions and related dangers. Where Calama was not the sole cause of a regulatory revolution, it was one vivid case in a long line of incidents that pushed football authorities toward clearer protections and firmer abandonment powers. As for Sanchez and Libertadores, the competition never became his story again. Calama, in effect, was the end of his Libertadores road. Not because he stopped refereeing immediately, he didn't, but because this was the last time South America's biggest club tournament put him in the middle. And maybe that is the best way to understand April 23, 2002. Not just as a bizarre interruption, not just as a disciplinary footnote, but as one of those nights when football's brilliance and football's stupidity collided in plain sight. A round of 16 first leg, a good tense first half, a festive crowd, then one coin, one cut, one abandonment, and one referee carrying that scar straight toward the World Cup. Before we go, 3 things to take away from April 23, 2002. First, this was not a random group stage oddity. It was a knockout match between a powerful Chilean club and one of Paraguay's giants, and it came in a Libertadores that Olimpia would go on to win. Second, the match itself had not yet become violent on the pitch. The darkness came from the stands, which is precisely why the incident remains so shocking. And third, Ángel Sánchez recovered in time for the World Cup, but Calama became the opening act in a brutal 3 weeks from him. One assault from the terraces, another from a player, both at the highest level of the game. On this day in 2002, the Copa Libertadores round of 16 match between Cobreloa and Olimpia was abandoned at halftime after a coin thrown from the stands struck referee Ángel Sánchez, turning a live knockout tie into a sanction, a warning, and a strange prelude to his stormy World Cup. That's all for episode 174 of OTD, your daily dose of soccer history by 17 Law Sky. Tomorrow, we'll go to April 24, 1906, when a Danish side won the final in their 1906 Olympic football tournament. See you then.